Today on Awaken to Your Freedom, I have a very special guest, Julie Larkin. Not only is she an incredible energy worker, but she's also one of my besties. And so, Julie, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Oh my gosh, right? Where to begin? I will start with the besties because Meg and I became besties because our daughters became besties. What, back in kindergarten,
Kindergarten.
seventh grade? So we go back a few years when you think about all that's happened in 7 years. Damn.
Definitely. We've been on a life journey together with lots of changes and
Lots,
lots of bumps, but lots of really good stuff too, I would say.
for sure amazing.
Yeah.
I guess sharing a little bit about me and specifically what we'll be talking about, well, in my 20s is when I first started playing with energy work and really just stumbled upon it with a friend. She was going for her massage licensure, and one of the classes that you could take as part of that certification was a Reiki class. And she invited me to come to it. And so that was my first experience. And I could definitely feel a vibration in my body when I was receiving. And and then it just kind of went from there. I mean, I just became incredibly interested from that point. And then you fast forward, man, it's really bizarre to be able to say fast forward 30 years from that point, and now it's so fascinating to look back, right? Where you are where you are now, and then you look back and you can see those inklings in your body and in your being and in your way that were always there. And so
Right.
of course that was the path that like you chose or I chose. So for me specifically, I just started taking various energy modalities and took a Tibetan modality, and then I learned from some people in here in Colorado in their own proprietary work. And then I also did healing touch, but I want to say it was somewhere in my 30s that I really just came to this very grounded truth that we are all energetic beings, and this is a gift that we all have and hold and carry. And to the point where I don't think that it's not, I think it's important to get trained, but I don't necessarily believe that you have to be attuned. I
Yeah.
feel this is what we are and what we do. And it's certainly helpful to be in studies to know how to maybe set intention and um, ground yourself and, quote unquote, protect yourself. I like to call it more just know what your container is versus somebody else's and things of that nature.
Sure.
But I just felt along the journey that it just felt so natural that we would all be this. And so I just follow my intuition. I don't really follow a specific modality at this point. So a little bit
So,
about,
yeah. So, for people that don't have never
mhm,
experienced energy work or Reiki, how would you describe it to somebody, that's never done it?
yep. Such a great question, and I'm going to give you probably partly what will be like a good answer, and partly one of those kind of annoying answers. And I'll start with the annoying part. Is that it really is different for everybody, and what I mean by that is some of us are much more feelers than others, and some of us might like hear things, and some people might get visions, or like it's almost like they go into a dream state and they might see things. So when you're receiving energy work, I think what I always tell people is to just let expectation go. And then I think the helpful part of my answer is that it feels to me like it's one of the most relaxing things that you can do for yourself, in the sense that how often do you really allow yourself to like lay, in my case I have people lay down on a table still. Some people do
Yeah.
energy sitting up while they're talking. We're moving energy all the time. But a traditional energy treatment, like a Reiki, let's say, you would be lying down and there is on body and off body touch, and it can be a combination. But it's one of the most relaxing things you'll receive because there's no needles, there's no elbows like pushing into your body. As much as we love massage, it's really quite it's like meditation on steroids is what it
Yeah.
feels like. Like you can like tap right into a meditative state often, and then in the same breath, in some instances, people are, their head's still spinning. But usually at some point in a session, there is a really profound relaxation response that takes hold in your physical body and in your mental state where you can
Yeah.
just relax.
I know for me when my sister did a lot of energy work, and I wasn't really open to it then. I think that's one thing that probably needs to be pointed out is any healing modality that you go after, you have to be ready to receive it, right? You have to be in
For
a
sure.
receptive mode. And for me, I remember the first time, I knew you as a friend so well. So, but I also knew during that time I wasn't getting separated from my husband. And I have spent my whole life really, I think, not being such a feeler, but not being in my body, kind of ignoring the feelings, ignoring all the things, pushing it away, putting this big shield around myself. I'm Megan can do this. I'm tough, and so for me, what can happen when you're in that fight or flight going through something that's just, you know, divorce, probably one of the hardest things you're going to go through, death, all the things. Um, for me, it was this amazing way to learn how to get back into my body, to be able to feel, to be able to feel myself and make sense, because so much of what's going on when you've got cortisol running through your body is you can't feel what you're really feeling. So can you talk about that, expand upon that a little bit more?
Well, I think you did a fantastic job. Truly, that's like it's a
Thanks,
beautiful.
Julie.
You're welcome, Megan. It really is. It's such a beautiful way to state it. And I early on coined all of us, like I used to say, we're walking lollipops. Like we're all up here. Like
Yeah,
so much of our energy is up in our headspace and in our mental churn and in our thinking and overthinking. And honestly, I think that was my favorite thing because it took me about a year plus to like find my rhythm and my themes and the way I show up with the energy work. But it was so amazing to watch the consistencies in the body or in the people I worked with. Like it was like
yes,
bringing them home to more
yes,
of their whole, full constitution. And there is a very natural and very easy or easeful, I guess is the word, because it just you feel easier, you feel um, more whole again. All that like anxiety or that cortisol response kind of chills out,
yep,
and you have all of your faculties to work with what you're living through when you're fully embodied is the word
yeah,
that I would use. So I used to always love to say, like, we take people from this, walking lollipop setup to this whole and complete you think about like pictures of if you've ever heard people talk about auras, that we really do extend beyond our physical bodies, and think about an oval, like beautiful oval aura around your physical being, and that is almost what it would feel like people would come home.
yeah,
And every once in a while, I used to say I would find it hard to find somebody. There was, and those are probably like when we're really in it and we're really heady and really shut off. And we can be shut off for a bunch of different reasons.
sure,
Um, and a whole bunch of, I always say like small t, capital T traumas. There's really good reasons why we shut off from our physical being.
right.
But it feels like such a beautiful gift to be able to hand somebody their wholeness in a short amount of time, and get
Yeah,
them out of
and
their head.
when I look at, like, first, it's kind of the first steps for me of kind of going through my awakening back to myself was a therapist, a safe place where I could just kind of share all the things. And what I found was once you understand the roots, like, the history, how you got here, how you played the part, all the things, right? And you've talked it out. Well, then it's all about, your body and really healing your body, because my mind can rationally understand all these things, but then I want to feel these things and not talk myself out of feeling them anymore.
Right.
So in that sense, like, my first step was you,
Hmm.
and really, like, getting back home. And that feeling of being home, the coolest part about it is all of the egoic thoughts can come in and kind of talk you out of like, no, you should stay in this because, blah, 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 and all the things. But when you can feel your body and you can really be feeling everything in it, then you're coming from a place of, no, this is my truth.
Yeah.
This is actually this, my mind is saying all these things, but this is how I feel. And nobody can doubt that because when you feel that, it's a knowing. Um, but without being in your body and being able to access that, it's really hard to make decisions that are coming from a truthful place.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And it is so fascinating because it's almost as if, we as, you know, women, well, we as people really take so much information from outside of ourselves for so much of our lives. And then again, like we've already stated a couple times, like we live with that, with the ego and the mind and the obsessive thought running the show. So even if, you know, you still do that battle, because some people will still battle that out. They'll feel, and
Right.
and then they'll still let this thing, this powerful machine, uh, talk oneself out. But it's like this really cool inner counsel. I always talk about, if I was to choose how to describe the work that I do with people, it's always tricky to say like what you would hope, but is that we would all learn that we are all our own best counsel. Like to get
Yeah.
all of us, myself included, to that place where you really do trust this body that's giving you so much information, and emotions too. Like emotions can be tricky because we need them. They're such powerful informants, but then we don't want to over identify and then get ourselves swirling on them, right? But I love how you say that, because if you can start to know your the messages that your heart and your body give you, and start to heed those in safe small ways at first, and then in the bigger ways, it's not going to steer you wrong, whereas we can kind of talk ourselves into a whole bunch of wonky situations with our mind. um,
Totally.
so it's powerful. It's super powerful.
It really is. So let's talk about what's happening there. So are you focusing on like blocked chakras? Are you feeling that? Are you feeling just blocked energy and opening up pathways for flow? Tell me kind of what is going on when you're working on somebody.
Yeah, it's a great question. For It's so different for everybody, because everybody has. I think we energy work is energy work, and the first thing I guess to say is that I'm not doing the healing. You are. The body on the table is doing the healing,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
just that you're positioning this room and this intention and this situation to be an open and clear conduit to pass divine light energy through. But it has nothing really per se to do with me, other than thematically the things that I've noticed that my work helps people with.
Yeah.
Um, and now I kind of got lost
No, I
on
was
the.
just saying, like, what are you feeling? And
Oh,
are you
what do I?
like,
Okay.
do you feel certain blocks somewhere when you're moving the energy?
Yep. So great question. For me, it's interesting because I used to, and this still has held true even in recent years. My work has, of course, become more, for lack of a better word, powerful over the longer I do it, and the more open I become, and the more,
Yeah,
I.
of course.
But for me, it's always been a bit of a dance of knowing what would help the person. Like so, I used to call it solution focused, because I wasn't the energy healer that was like, oh my gosh, we've got so much heaviness in your heart chakra. We better clear that out. That really wasn't what it felt like to me. I would be aware of a flow or a lack of flow. I would be aware, and for me, it's visceral. It's such a visceral dance for me. So it's like a vibey sort of feel in my palms almost immediately. It'll feel different in different places on the body. I just pay attention. I'll get a hunch on where I should go next, and it's usually been corroborated by the person on the table. Like, how did you know? Or that felt, that was a good place to be. Um, Sometimes I get hunches on what's clearing. Sometimes I don't know what's clearing, but I know something is clearing because clearing energy to me feels a little bit like nausea. And I've learned that over the years.
Yeah.
Um, there's just so many like visceral nuances for me. And I don't always know per se exactly what's happening, but the pieces where I'll get hunches can often be around like inner child
Yeah.
story, just like a deeper, younger version of yourself that just needs your loving attention.
Yeah.
That will show up often. Um, and then I have what they call clairsentience. It's just like this knowing, and the way I know to share something is if it continues to loop. And when I'm not kidding. It will just loop and loop and loop and knock and just keep knocking until I'm like, okay, I'm
Right.
gonna
Yeah.
share that and then kind of move on, and then it'll loop and loop and loop, and I'll share the next thing. So it's a little bit of two, it's a visceral dance for me, and then it's this clair sentient looping that tells me to share.
It's really cool. I mean, I know for me, I can feel it like when you're moving energy on me, I can usually feel it, I would say, up to 6 inches above my body. And it's kind of, it feels like it's denser there, and I can really feel the movement of it
Yeah.
flowing around or out. And for me, like when I wasn't in my body, and you know, there's a lot of things that I think can happen energetically with blocking and all kinds of things, but those warning signals that we get as humans. So my warning signal comes in my solar plexus, right below my belly button. It starts to churn if
Yeah.
something's not right or somebody's kind of like invading my boundaries or whatever. That's where I get it.
Yep.
But when I wasn't in my body, those weren't like those weren't showing up all the time, those warning signals. And I think what's really cool is
Or they were, but
right.
you weren't aware of them.
I wasn't aware of them. Of course they were showing up. Yeah. And so the coolest thing of coming home, as you say, to your body is like our body is always talking to us. And when you when you when you arrive home again, and look, I'm not saying once you've done one Reiki session you're grounded and home and you don't have to do any more. You easily can become ungrounded very quickly, but the more and more we practice it, we can learn how to do it ourselves. So I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about that,
Love to.
and getting back home by ourselves, some of the ways that we can do that, and you and I have both learned different ways to do that.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's I think one of the most empowering things is being pointed home, right? However you get there. So if that's through energy work or if that's through some other modality of just arriving in your wholeness or your fullness, like what a blessing. Um, but this idea of little enough and make much, like the consistency and the regularity with which you do something, that you make it yours, right?
Yeah.
Versus the one off, and then you're back to life per usual. I am a huge proponent of what I've always liked to call it, energetic hygiene. So, you know, we have regular hygiene that we've been taught since we were 2 and 3 years old, to do daily. Like you're supposed to brush your teeth twice a day, maybe 3 times a day if you're really good and you do it after lunch. Um, Not everybody does that, but
Me.
energetic hygiene just makes sense to me. And as I journeyed through this, not just as a provider of energy work, but as an experiencer in my body, because the more I did energy work, of course, the more I opened up. And then the more I could feel like just day to day life, like you're saying, like I
Sure.
could feel my body more. I could feel the messages that I was being given and that I was receiving through my physicality. Um, and with that can come sort of like realizing just how much we can get muddled in a day by life, by busyness, by society, by just input, right? So I like this idea of every day grounding. So just intending that you are beautifully grounded to the crystal core of the earth. And this is all super intentional. Some people will choose something that's a little bit more nature driven. So instead of like maybe visualizing a tunnel of light from your hips down into the crystal core of the earth, and again, just intend it. Some people like to envision that their legs are roots of a tree, right? And that they're rooting into the ground and just really feeling connected with the earth. And then even more simple is just going and taking a walk outside
Yeah.
in nature will ground you, will
Yeah.
naturally ground you. And even more so if you are intending that and using the power of this powerful machine of a brain to intend that. And so, when it's warm out, being barefoot and walking on grass, amazing way to ground,
Definitely.
you know? And then this idea of the energetic hygiene piece is more, you know, uh, again, to give it that same, it's not brushing your teeth or flossing, it's flossing your field. It's fluffing and flossing your field and just sort of intending to clear your energy every day.
Yeah, like sometimes I see you kind of doing that.
Too.
Yeah.
It's it's funny because even before I started, I mean, this is probably before I started offering energy work to people. And then of course afterward, I used to work in a restaurant and I've always enjoyed lots of people. I'm a people person and I'm a high feeler. So it's this interesting combo.
Right.
And I would work, it was a big crowded ale house, and I would walk to my shift down the street and I would be that girl, like doing this on my way to my shift, like setting up. Like I would like make intentions for myself to stay grounded, to stay present, and then to kind of just own my space. Like I personally love the most, like, and this is an easy thing for me to remember and for many to remember because it was always looked at negatively. I want you to be full of yourself. It's such a weird thing to say, but I really do. I want you and me and everyone to fill their space and
Yeah.
take up their space. And if everybody stayed home and present, we wouldn't like Julie that person over there and you wouldn't Meg that person over there. I mean, it just wouldn't get so muddled.
Yep.
So that's the other piece that I would do. I would be like walking to work, filling up, owning my space, clearing what wanted to be cleared, and then just setting intention for my shift.
I mean, that's great. I love that because how many times do we get grounded and we feel great and we walk out into the world and then next thing you know, like someone's energy is coming at us and next thing you know, we are taking on that energy and all of a sudden that high vibe is gone and we're back down. And so yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. Setting up your space, protecting yourself, like when you go out into the world or you know you're going to be around somebody that might make you feel uneasy. How do you do that on a
Yeah.
regular basis? I love that.
Yeah, I do too. And I always feel like there's two things I always like to say here. And this is the Church of Julie. So just let it be that. You choose what you want to do with this. I do believe we can't help but feel each other because we ultimately are all connected.
Yeah.
And there is a beauty and there is a grace in that. And it is as it is meant to be. And so, in many cases, I want us to just check a little bit that thought of like, oh, these people, they're just messing with my vibe, like that, right? Because we do have those feelings, right?
Right.
That person just brought me down, right? So I feel like we want to balance that first off, but I love what you said at the end. Like, if you know that you're going someplace that has been triggering for you or hard for you, whether that is, wow, I'm finding that my job is just draining the hell out of me.
Sure.
Um, like whether it's a job like I just described or something else, or if it's a specific person, especially if you're gearing up for a conversation that is hard for you and potentially going to be triggering. I think doing what I mentioned on my little practice on the way to work is brilliant. And so one of the things I do is, again, I first intend to ground and to be really rooted into the earth, the power of the earth, the calm, the solid ground, if you will, right? Like
Yeah.
just be rooted in the present moment. And then I also like to call forth my highest self and ask that I can come at the conversation from a higher aspect of myself, knowing that I might get triggered, but that I want to really call her to lead. Again, We all know how this could go. We all know we get triggered and then things are going to go south, but that's okay. Um, so, and then the other thing that I think is super powerful that I've learned in my past, as a what I call a delineation. And again, because it kind of makes it less keep them out. It's
Right.
just like I want to know where my energy ends, and I want to know where the other person's energy begins.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, as empaths, and you and I can relate to this, you sometimes don't even know. You're feeling this energy, and you're like, you think it's yours, but it's not even yours. It might even be the person that you're in a conversation with.
Or not. Like I can walk into a room
Right.
and feel someone across the room, like see somebody across the room and know that person's having a really hard day. And I can
Complete.
start to feel their sadness. And so it's not even just the conversation sometimes, it can be
You're right.
somebody far away. Um,
Especially now, especially the awakened versions of ourselves.
yeah.
But to back up, because I think the piece that I think is going to be important for the individual conversation and for what you just mentioned, just walking into any old room, is using a delineator like a rose. The rose is apparently one of the highest vibrational living flowers or plants on the planet. So it resonates at a high vibration, or yeah, resonates, vibrates at a high vibration. So I was taught in some of my studies to utilize it as a delineator between me and the other.
Yep.
So I can tell you with um, great honesty that I'll find myself in a conversation with just about anybody, and if it starts to get heated, I will intend, with my thoughts, just to put a really beautiful rose up right in between the two of us, and just sort of let that catch any energy on the outside, so it doesn't have. I don't have to take it in. I can
Yeah.
feel it. I can still know the stress and the vibe and the feels that are happening, but I don't have to pull it into my system and like marinate with it. And that rose intentionality has really served me. I'm
Me
curious
too.
what you've
No,
used.
me too.
I'll
I
use
use
it
the
on the
rose.
fly too.
I
Yeah,
love the rose.
yeah,
I think early on in my life when I look back, you know, being the people pleaser and helper, I always you think like taking on other people's energy was being so nice. Here I am, I'm listening to them, I'm trying to help them. And wow, what a change for me now because I feel like what's really being kind to me is not doing that, is really like holding my energy and my boundaries. And boundaries are something that I will just try, not try, I can't use the word try,
yeah.
but boundaries are something that'll constantly be a challenge for me. I'm getting better all the time, but so I also think that we as people have some of us have been trained from an early age that to help people and be there
Totally.
and but really that needs to come to us first. And that goes with motherhood and spouses and everything. And that took a long time to kind of hone in on for me.
No, it's so good, and especially for women, like you said, motherhood, being a wife, the way womanhood was modeled for us was, let me take your load, let me take
Yeah,
it, let me help
let
you,
me
let me help
carry the load until
you.
you're really tired and depleted. And the rose can work with your kids too. So let's face
Oh
it. I mean, you and I both have teenagers now. Sometimes you have to put up your rose with your kids too.
Oh yeah, I'm using it a lot with my daughter right now for that reason. It's a hard time. It's a hard time on the planet. It's a hard time for middle schoolers, and it's really helpful for me because again, the sensitivities that we have, it really helps to soften so that you can stay in your grounded state or your sovereign state, so that you can be a better I'll say a better adult
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah,
doing.
definitely.
I wanted to share something when you said that about, we were taught to take it in, and that was what we were supposed to do as women. Well, it was interesting. Around the same time that I learned the rose, it was, I believe it was the same teacher. She lives here in Boulder, Miwa Linehan, now Miwa Mac. But she would talk about how when we do that, because we were really taught that. I mean, that was what we were all taught to do. And we were like,
Yep.
oh, we're helping. We're helping. But the way she described it was that when we take a piece of somebody else's like story or whatever it is, like we actually are um, not allowing them to have all of that to work with to find their solution.
Yep.
So it's almost like, we look at that as enabling or codependent, which we can
Yeah.
both relate to how that's
Yeah.
played out in our lives. But it also really doesn't allow them to ever rise, which is a big story of
So
codependence.
true. And such a beautiful way to look at it that, everybody is on their own journey here. And part of their journey is kind of awakening to their own healing and the things that the conditioning they learned as kids, that we're all unraveling right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
happy day.
I know it feels like a very fun roller coaster ride.
It does. How about kids and teenagers with energy work, Julie? I know you've worked with some. I think, when I look at it, some of the hard parts is talking the kid into doing something like this, but I think it can be extremely beneficial for kids to feel back in their body.
Too.
So you
I
want to
think
talk
it's
a little bit about that?
one of the most important things, really,
Yeah.
which is why we all have found anybody who's a parent can see that difference between a kid that has been sitting versus one that's been moving for a while.
Yeah.
It's not only yes are there endorphins that get released that make one feel better, but really it's about getting out of the head and getting in the body, getting the blood flowing. So I think it's really, really key. Um, Kind of like anybody, of course, we know like you can't force anybody to do anything. I've had a couple of wives who have like pushed their husbands in the door, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't really work. They kind of have to choose it. But I've worked on a couple of preteen kiddos in my day, and I think just like you would imagine, they're just so much faster to like just chill. Like
Yeah.
things fall off them faster. And all I have to go on for that, it feels like really simplistic, but it feels to me like a truth. They have less overlay than somebody who's older.
Yeah. Definitely.
I've got close to 50 years. I mean, whatever, let's say 40 years because pre 10. Well, no, I've got 50 years of overlay that
Yeah.
I might be dealing with versus a kiddo who is 12. You can kind of clear and get them centered and grounded and back connected into their system so much faster. And they've been there much more recently than maybe an adult has who's gone through some shit and maybe lived through our culture, that our fast-paced culture for a very long time, disconnected, the walking lollipop.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful work for kids if they're open to it.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too. Is there, when somebody's has a lot of anxiety, is there, I almost felt like it, when I was in it, I could get this done almost daily, but a lot of this too is learning how to do it ourselves, over time. So is there, a frequency that you ever recommend, or it's just kind of how you're feeling? If someone's really in it.
I would say definitely how you're feeling. I
Yeah.
mean, if there is something super acute happening and a child is asking for it and or open to it, it might be good to do it in the same frequency that you might recommend therapy.
Yeah.
It's a very different. I mean, I think about it. My daughter's not very open to it, and I think that's divinity too, right? Like
Of course it
her,
is.
her weird mom does energy work, right? So, it's beautiful, and the seeds are planted. So she's played with energy when she was young because I spoke about it, but she's not as open to it. But where you can get that knowing sense that if she was to incorporate that a little bit more, it would actually really help the therapeutic process too. And I very much found that because I worked with quite a few people who were in therapy, actively in therapy, but that would get on the table. And then a therapist would reach out to me. One in particular came and got on my table. She's like, every time you work on one of my clients, it's like they have some sort of a breakthrough.
Yeah. I,
Again,
I would think they'd go hand in hand really well.
they they do because this has so much more information and this does a lot of our healing. Like our
Yeah.
body does the healing. It's not so much that our brain's doing the healing. But so yeah, frequency I would say once a week if it's acute, once every other week, once a month. But maybe we can like swap this conversation next. Like, how does one do this for yourself?
Oh,
Like teaching kids and adults, like what that could look like.
yeah, and I think that would be great. We live in Colorado, which is very open to healing modalities, but there's a lot of people that live in areas that aren't, that don't have a lot of access to Reiki energy workers. Um, so there is always a phone option with people, but can you talk about that a little bit, like the experience of in person versus phone for somebody?
Completely. And I'll answer this one from both perspectives. Again, it's going to be about choice. It's going to be about trying it and honoring what that feels like for you. If it's your first time receiving energy, you're not going to have a way to compare it. So
Yeah.
no biggie, just give it a go and see what happens, see how you feel. Um, when I first started to offer distance healing, I set it up with a girlfriend of mine from my hometown because I wanted to practice. Because I had a filter within me that I was like, this is not going to be the same. Like, how could this possibly be the same? And I found it to be just as powerful, sometimes even more. And so I find that fascinating. And I liken that to when in my case or anybody, when you do coaching work with somebody and they're in front of you versus when they're on the phone or there isn't a face to face. It's like writing in your diary. There's almost like more openness. There's
Yeah.
more ability to like put down your defenses and be more vulnerable.
Hmm.
Um, it's almost like there's less noise when you're distant. So it can be just as powerful or more powerful either way, right? Um, as a practitioner or a receiver. And in the same breath, there were times for me as a receiver where I preferred touch. There's just something really
Yeah,
sacred of touch in
there
and
is.
of itself. I mean, I think this is actually a great segue into when we do talk about self energy work or self healing. But if if you just find that that's a piece of what you crave is just to have like the hand on your body to just and it's of course safe gentle touch, then you might just try to seek out somebody in person as best you can. But I'll tell you, they're both powerful. And
Yeah, and I've experienced both, and I love in person, but I've also had the same benefits as somebody over the phone as well.
yep,
I would make sure that, the house is quiet or you're in a
yeah,
quiet, comfortable place, because that's the beauty of going somewhere, is you're going to be in a space that is quiet and set up for that.
yeah,
So I wouldn't try and do it when your kids are running around and being crazy and all the things. Dinner's
no,
about to go on the table, but yeah, it's amazing when you think about energy. I at first was like, can this really go on over the phone? And it absolutely can. So
yeah. That's why, like, you'll be thinking about somebody from halfway across the country and they call you. It's the same thing. It's just this that kinetic energy and the power of intention, which is
yeah.